They also have this sense of complex, you can probably say, that they know that their economy isn't competitive with the West. They know that they have demographic problems that are looming in the future. They don't really have that much that they can be proud of, apart from their history of being an imperial power and their strength in land wars, especially sacrificing large amounts of men in order to achieve their objective. And this seems that this war is becoming a classic Russian war. It's an artillery war. It's a war of masses, both when it comes to military production and also when it comes to these attacks. For example, we saw in Bakhmut that they were basically sending masses and masses, and they were dying in enormous quantities, but they kept on pushing until they took the city.
Absolutely. And to better understand the Russian soul, I highly recommend to read a book by Nobel Prize winner Svetlana Alexievich, Belarusian non-fiction writer. And she wrote a book about the women in Soviet army during Second World War. And this book, I think, shows very clearly how people in Russia think, how to what extent they can sacrifice themselves to win the war, to what extent they can obey orders, even if these orders mean to send people to die on the battlefield. To what extent the people living in Russia can accept that they are just cannot fought there. And they feel that it's totally justified because they are fighting for great Russia,
yes,
for the great homeland. So even though this is the book from the Second World War, it is, in my opinion, it is very, very relevant to understand how Russian people think. Moreover, I'm pretty sure that the problem with Russian is that they lost Cold War, but they can't understand why it happened. This is a bit similar to what happened to German people after First World War. We need to remember that during the First World War, Germany was not occupied. There were soldiers still fighting in the trenches, and suddenly there was a peacekeeping negotiations and some truce. And German people felt we were betrayed by our politicians, and there was some kind of plot.
Yes, a certain Austrian painter called it the Dolchstich legend, the stab in the back legend. Or not legend, he just called it the stab in the back, meaning that some evil people had conspired against the German army, and they made the Tsar, Kaiser Wilhelm, to his rules to collapse. And they forced the peace, while Germany could technically have won the war, according to that type of logic.
Exactly. And at that time, this conspiracy was prepared by Jewish people.
Yes.
They were the ones that were evil. And when talking about Russian people mindset, there's a pretty similar situation. They had a Soviet empire that was a powerful country that compete with the USA. And Soviet Empire didn't fail, didn't lose any war. And suddenly, there were some bad guys in the government, like Gorbachev.
Yes, Gorbachev and
Yeltsin. And they conspired, this time with Americans and in general with Western powers, to sell Soviet Empire. But Russian people didn't feel on themselves that they lost this war. And that's why I think currently they are so eager to believe that, we were betrayed, and right now we have a right to vengeance. It is absolutely justified, and this is our historical moment that we can regain what is ours. And what is it? It is, of course, Ukraine, and also, in general, Central Europe.
Finland.
Of course.
Everything up to Berlin. Sometimes, famously, Putin himself once joked when there was a young little boy that came up on a TV show, and he asked the little boy, where do the borders of Russia end? And the little boy was about to answer exactly where, and he said, nowhere.
And this is actually a very sincere answer that gives us insight to how Russian people think. That's why when we are talking about what's going on, what will happen in Ukraine, and when we are discussing the scenarios of potential Russian aggression against any of NATO member states, it is vital not only to, of course, precisely check the potential. I don't want to say this is important. Yeah, it is. We need to try to count the number of ammunition production, armaments production, how Russian economics go, and generally it goes not very well. But we can't forget about Russian mindset, that they can sacrifice a lot. They can sacrifice their economics, they can sacrifice their people to rebuild an empire. And this is this force that gives Russians impetus. So even if from our very rational Western point of view, starting a war against NATO would be a suicide, from Russian point of view, it might be the last chance to rebuild an empire. Because, of course, also Russian political elites, they realize that in general, Russia as a state is losing this civilizational competition, that Russian companies, they are not doing well, that their economy is based on hydrocarbons, and supposedly in 2-3 decades they will not be able to get enough profits from selling hydrocarbons to sustain Russian budget. So that's why this is the very good moment to continue the aggression, not to stop the war, but to develop the war.
And it also looks like the Russians, they have a certain view of international politics. They believe that the America was the hegemon, that after 1989 and 1991, that they took unilateral control of the world. But now we are moving toward a multipolar world order in which Russia's main ally is naturally China, which is on the rise. But I think the Russians are also slightly afraid of becoming too much of a junior partner in this relationship with China. So maybe this is also a way of showing the Chinese that, okay, we might not be as rich as you are, but we have military might, we are willing to use it. And look, we won the war in Ukraine, and potentially, because we must remember that before the war in Ukraine broke out, the Russians sent a note to the Western allies saying that you need to withdraw your NATO troops from all the countries that joined NATO after 1997. So basically, all of the old Soviet satellite states need to, and now we have Finland as well that has become a member. So basically, they want NATO to move all the way back to Berlin, and the rest would be some form of Russian influence sphere. Maybe they can share it a little bit with the West when it comes to the economy, but absolutely not military. So it's an interesting question to see how much the view on on China affects Russian military doctrine in Ukraine. But going back to Ukraine itself, you were there on 2 occasions, if I remember correctly.
I was there many times since February 24th.
It was back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, I was traveling back and forth. Truly speaking, I had been covering war in Ukraine since 2015, so even before the onset of full-scale invasion. But focusing on what happened during past almost 2 years. I was traveling back and forth. I was working as a war correspondent for first channel of Polish TV, TVP1.
And now you can say that Polish-Ukrainian relations are a little bit strained lately. We had problems with this blockade at the border of Ukrainian truckers trying to enter the EU, and Polish truckers not wanting to let them in because they fear Ukrainian competition, which they believe is unfair. There were previously also the grain issue that was a problem for a while. But earlier when you were there, Polish-Ukrainian relations were probably at an historical high. I think never before had there been so good. How did the Ukrainians react to meeting a Polish person close to the front lines?
We are describing our current relations as a friendship. And some people say, okay, it's not a friendship because there are tensions. there is this strike of carriers on the border. There were some problems with grains. There were also statements of Ukrainian officials that were read in Poland as a pretty even offensive. However, I will stick to this term friendship because I think talking about the friendship between officials and states, it's not a proper wording. It's not a realm of friendship politics, not a realm of friendship.
Yeah,
but
more
friendship,
of interest.
Yeah, more of interest. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I would say it's pretty risky to add such a strong emotions to politics. However, when we are talking about the relations between people, yeah, there is in a peak, it was a friendship, and I would say it is still a friendship between ordinary people. I heard so many times in Ukraine that people are grateful. They are saying, thank you very much. You are from Poland. You did so much for us. You accepted our women and children. You supported them. You are providing us with humanitarian aid. You are providing us with weaponry. You are advocating for us on the international level. And I heard it from soldiers, shop assistants, taxi drivers, people that on the streets, some very often people that I didn't know, and it's still happening to me. So, and what is also very important is that we as the nations finally meet each other. Like millions of Polish people met millions of Ukrainian people, and it has started long-lasting relations. So I would say that despite political arguments, and despite that in politics there are interests, as you mentioned, I think that this strong bond between Polish and Ukrainian people will gonna last. I don't know, I won't say forever, but in a long term. And this is something very important. And also important is that in Poland, in general, I got the feeling that we understand that this is also our war. That if Ukraine fails, we as Polish people gonna be next in the row. That we can be invaded by Russia.